Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji.
Welcome back to another episode of The Deconstructed Woman. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Carin Luna-Ostaseski. She is a very innovative person, and she's had 3 acts, which I find fascinating. But today what we're going to focus on mainly is going to be the work that she has done around menopause and perimenopause and really putting a fresh spin on it to not make it a taboo conversation, but one to really help women identify what's going on with them during this period of our life, as well as really created a resource for women called Hot or Just Me, which I think is a fabulous name. And it has a lot of different products and a lot of bundles on there that can help women find things to help them during all the different symptoms we're going to talk about today. And Carin, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be speaking with you both.
Oh, we are really excited. I know that Alyssa has some of her own questions. She's a little bit younger than us, but well on her way to getting older and understanding what we're going to be talking about. But I know she has some very specific questions for you. And I wanted to start off by really sharing with the listeners what a great Time magazine article that you had published in September 17th, 2024. The article was by Angela Haupt, and it can be found on time.com. But what I really loved about this article was the very systematic sort of review of the symptoms. And for full disclosure, I'm 57. I am through menopause, and so I'm living the good life, no periods, none of those kinds of things that I have to deal with. But I still do have a lot of the symptoms that you talk about in the article. And what I wanted to first hear from you is, why did you think this was an important topic to put out into the world?
Absolutely. Thank you. I was feeling some of the symptoms you might have had when I was in my early 40s. I'm 47 now. And around 40 to 43, I started getting some hot flashes and night sweats and waking up in the middle of the night soaked in sweat and not able to go back to sleep, and just started asking myself and pretty much everyone around me, is it hot or is it just me? And yeah, I just came to realize that it was mostly just me, and also that I was deep into perimenopause. Realized that it was something that was very common, but just not frequently discussed. And the more that I looked for answers, the more questions I had. And this came trying to find HRT solutions with a doctor that wasn't the right fit, eventually finding the right doctor that was a fit, poking around, trying to find information, asking myself, is this normal constantly? And realized that there wasn't really a resource out there that kind of had everything you need in terms of resources, products, service directories for women in perimenopause. So I decided it was time to create one.
Yeah. And I feel like the article really spoke to probably every woman's experience, but mine as well, in terms of I started perimenopause probably in my mid-30s. And so it was really I didn't expect it. My mom had a baby at 40, and so she didn't go through menopause till much later. And so for me, I thought it's 35, it's way too early. And then I went to a series of doctors who didn't believe my symptoms and one actually thought I was drug seeking, which I thought that was interesting. So I was asking her about witch hazel and trying to figure out, is that a natural option for me to use? And I don't know how she got drug seeking out of that conversation, but I just felt like I was so misunderstood. And yet my husband and my daughter were begging me to get on some medication because they thought that I was really irritable, and that there were times that I thought that I was really coming out of my skin. I just felt like there was a creature inside of me that was just busting to get out of my body. And I really couldn't control it, but I also didn't know what to do about it. And the doctors really weren't very helpful.
I had such a similar experience, but rather than drug seeking, I think that I was finding that they were pushing drugs on me. So I was feeling a lot of anxiety that I had never felt before. And I talk about that in the Time article as well, where I was having heart palpitations, and I thought, what is happening here? and a little bit of sadness and depression that didn't seem to go away. And it was only like a couple weeks, but they were really quick to say you should start taking these SSRIs. And I thought, well, this seems like a little too much. And same thing with like sleep. They're like ready to prescribe Xanax. And I thought, let me just take a step back and see if there's more holistic approaches to some of these symptoms before going into this like pharmaceutical world.
And I will say that about 10, 15 years ago, when I started having these conversations, I think that HRT or hormone replacement therapy was seen as a not a good option. And so I work in the medical field. And so I was good friends with a lot of different specialists in the hospital. And I remember talking to an oncologist and saying, are biosimilars bad for you? What is hormone therapy like? And he said, I always advise women as I would advise my mom or my sister. And he said at that time, I wouldn't do hormone replacement therapy. Now, I will say that I've recently heard some research about the fact that medicine has come around that, and now they feel like there's a little bit more openness to it without the fear of developing cancer. But what is your knowledge about HRT in terms of its contemporary uses?
Yeah, so I think a great book for listeners is called The New Menopause by Dr. Mary Claire Haver. And she goes into depth about the flawed study, or rather the results of it, that gave HRT kind of a bad reputation. I think it's a really personal journey for people. For me, growing up, when I started taking birth control around like 1920, I had just such a severe reaction emotionally to some of the hormones and found myself, it was causing more harm than good. And so I decided that it wasn't, I tried a few different brands as well. So it wasn't just like a one and done thing. And then fast forward when it was time that I thought, oh my gosh, I'd like to have babies. And now it's almost too late. So I was 38 when I had my first daughter, and that was with the help of IVF. And so I was pumped with a ton of hormones to get the eggs and then implantation and all of that fun stuff, right? Again, had severe reactions emotionally and physically to the hormones. And knowing that HRT is very different, right? Like I could take a small low dose, there's different modalities, there's new drugs out in the market now. There's patches and creams and oral pills. There's just so many modalities for it. And so I had to go back to the doctor conversations, the doctors that were trying to prescribe me all of these pharmaceuticals. I said, this is not my doctor. And then in my research, I came to find out that most doctors in the United States only get about 3 hours of training in menopause during their residency. So they're completely uninformed when it comes to what's happening. Of course, they're trying to like treat the symptoms by what we're saying we're having versus taking a holistic look and saying, how old are you? And what other symptoms are you having? Or let me refer you to my colleague who is a menopause specialist or has taken extra certifications in menopause. And I think what's happening is that with OBGYNs, they're very in the practice of delivering babies. So unless you have a doctor who's taken that extra step to say, I want to be informed about menopause and this later stage in life, or maybe it's a female doctor who hasn't retired just yet, finding that doctor that's right for you. And I finally did, and had great conversations with her about HRT and my relationship with hormones in the past, and then also just where I was with my symptoms. So we determined together that while I am open to HRT, it's just not a conversation I'm ready for just yet, but I am open to it in the future. So just realizing that my symptoms aren't so bad yet that I'm a candidate, and at some point I will be. And interestingly enough, I've had a lot of learnings about the male version of menopause, where women's estrogen declines at this time in life. Men have a similar decline of testosterone. And so I'm having conversations with my husband now who's taking testosterone replacement therapy because men have through andropause, really similar symptoms as women. So mood swings, depression, headaches, there's night sweats, insomnia, weight gain, hair loss, you name it. But it's just something that we are just now talking about as a society in terms of perimenopause, menopause, and now andropause as well.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating. And I'm married to an older man. And I think that it's good to know that's also a trend or a pattern that we should keep our eyes open for, because it's not something that I was really aware of at all. There's so much focus on women's decline that it's definitely something that needs to be more education out there. One of the other things I wanted to ask you was that the other thing that happens with women, and it's happened to a couple of my female relatives, is that there is like a polycystic syndrome that happens where sometimes part of the therapy for that is pushing women into menopause or having a hysterectomy or having, and one of my family members had severe endometriosis, and to the point where they didn't think that she was going to be able, they were amazed that she actually had two children. And so one of the conversations that she had talked to me about was, what do you know about this? Is that a real thing? Because she's also more holistically focused. And so I think that there's overlap because there are some situations where doctors put you into menopause, and these are younger women than those of us in our mid 40s or 50s. And so have you seen any information about that, or would you have the same kind of recommendations for a younger woman who might be considering a hysterectomy? Because you had mentioned that in the Time magazine article that some doctors just want to put a surgical cure on something that is in totality just a hormonal issue. And so I thought it made me think of my family members that I've had this discussion with.
Yeah, yeah. The article was definitely filled in with quite a few medical professionals that have spoken to that. So I just want to make sure to clarify, I'm not a medical professional. I don't claim to be, and people should always consult their doctors first. So the article definitely goes into that from the perspective of these doctors. I can only speak from personal experience that I have seen friends that have gone through breast cancer and have had to take hormone inhibiting medicines that have triggered an early menopause. And it's so unfortunate to witness because it's almost as if we have our symptoms span through perimenopause anywhere between 3 and 10 years. And this is happening at such an accelerated pace that it could happen all of it within a month's time. So it just happens so quickly and so severely that it just has a huge impact. And that said, there are some symptoms that some women don't experience at all, and some have in different levels of severity and time. And then just some vocabulary around it. So perimenopause is the time leading up to the day of menopause. And menopause is the day that you haven't had your cycle for 12 months. And then postmenopause would be every day after that. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, I was gonna just jump in because I think that I'm like on the very brink of this. And so when Joji and I started talking about it, I thought it was so interesting because I just turned 40 last year, and I'm in that category, if you will, that Joji was just talking about, that I'm done having children and was having conversations with my doctor, and I had some heavy bleeding. And so the conversation went into the direction of having a hysterectomy. And I really struggled with that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's maybe 5 steps. And I think every single time I had the conversation with another one of my friends or another woman, they're like, oh, that's a pretty big leap from like where you are to a hysterectomy. And so I scaled back and said, okay, what are my other options, and exploring that. And I think in a lot of ways, it looks different for every single person. Everyone has their own journey in this stage of life. But I also have friends who are, again, in their late 30s, early 40s, who are going into perimenopause. And so there's so many factors that we're weighing, but also I don't have any education on this topic. And just to make medical decisions, I was thrown into, okay, I have to learn all of this very quickly to make a decision of what's next steps for me. So that's my quick little journey currently. But I think that it is so much so depends on our mothers also and what their journey was, because I know for both my grandmother and my mother, they both had hysterectomies in their early 40s. And so I don't know when people in my family are hereditarily go into menopause because they had that procedure. So I'm sitting here and taking all of the information and realizing that I have a lot more to learn from all of this as well.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just such great resources out there now too, finally, right? Where we are learning more, we're talking about it more. There's a wealth of doctors that are putting in the time and energy to be more educated. And I encourage people to look at menopause.org as a resource to find those medical practitioners.
You in the article, you did review like the sort of the 8 major symptoms that come along with menopause. And of course, I feel like these are close friends of mine. So I'm going to do them quickly, but I want to ask you some questions. Regular periods, hot flashes, vaginal dryness, joint pain, weight gain, brain fog, mood swings, and a shattered sense of identity. And I think the ones that surprised me the most was joint pain, because I've never heard of that. And then also, I wanted to hear a little bit from you about what all do you include in the the shattered sense of identity.
Yeah. So for joint pain, more than 70% of women will experience some kind of musculoskeletal pain during perimenopause. And it can be really intense for about 25% of them. There's changing levels of estrogen, there's a loss of your muscle mass, loss of bone density, and that can lead to progression of arthritis, frozen shoulder, and other kinds of joint pain. So it's there's a physical therapy as a solution, but there's, I think, prioritizing what you can for having good nutrition and bringing resistance training into your exercise program. It definitely helps. I think as people age, there's also that risk of falls, which can lead to almost like a snowball effect of other injuries. So just making sure that you have a lot of strength, especially in your lower body, prioritizing resistance training, lots of squats, climbing stairs, just having more strength in your lower body is important as we age. For a shattered sense of identity, I think it's this time I was listening to your podcast about, I think you were talking about doing a skin treatment on your face, and it really hit me of the societal pressures that we have as women of looking a certain way or looking young or just trying to keep it all together. And so we have this kind of moment as we think, okay, I had this again when I was 38 and trying to have a baby and realizing, oh my gosh, why can't I do this one thing that I'm supposed to be able to do as a woman naturally? And reaching the end of your cycle, it comes up with this feeling of fertility and youth. And so there's a lot that comes on at this age. We are taking care of our parents, we're taking care of our children, we have our jobs, our careers, we might be like running a business. And then put on top of it all of this extra pressure of being a certain way or kind of anti-aging. And so it's just something that it comes across almost like as a second puberty, right? Where you're just dealing with a lot of stress and shame about how you look and what's happening in your mind. And women are definitely just either holding it in or not realizing that this is a shared universal experience, that we don't have to be alone, that we can lean on each other, our community, our doctors, and, each other for just realizing that we're all going through this.
As you were talking, I was thinking about like a second puberty. When you said that, I thought to myself, isn't it ironic that we actually had more information about puberty
Yeah.
and that the body talk and all that kind of thing, but there isn't a mechanism to give that kind of education to women in their 30s and 40s about what's coming. Why do you think that gap exists?
So I think it's definitely a generational thing. I remember as a kid, I didn't know when my mom was going through perimenopause or menopause. I do have this very clear memory of her cranking up the AC for a certain time in life that she never did before. We were all like wearing coats inside of the house for a bit there. But I think as a society, we celebrate the coming of age of our daughters becoming women and our boys becoming men. And we have the talk with them and we see that their bodies are changing. They're getting acne, they're developing breasts and body hair and all of these things that are happening to their bodies. And we talk to them about it as the beginning, but we don't say, this will end. You will have a decline in your hormones as you age, and just give them the whole journey, right? And I think being able to fill that conversation full circle is important, but also that now, because women of our age are starting to talk about it more publicly, I have faith that it won't be something that our kids will reach and have that same feeling of what's happening here. So I think that's definitely changing.
Yeah, and I was gonna say I appreciate that there is the resources that you provided and that there's more information out there, because I think that at this point it's almost like in the same way that when a young girl gets her first period and she's terrified. I think that in a lot of ways you hear all of the different things about what perimenopause and menopause look like, and again you feel like, oh my gosh, like what is this going to look like? How is my body going to feel? What is that going to do for my mood and all of that? And so I think that it's definitely good that there's information out there, but also these conversations need to be put out there and more attention given to it so that people are, both men and women, are aware of the changes that do naturally happen to us as we get older.
Yeah, it's funny. When my oldest kid is starting to have these emotional swings, right? Where she was crying one day, and I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "I don't know why I'm crying. I just am." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I know exactly what's happening here, and I know what that feels like." And it was funny because it's like some of these same inner thoughts that you have when you're a teenager. What's happening to me? What's happening to my body? Is this normal? Nobody gets it. It's so similar to what we have in this stage in life as well.
Yeah. When I went through your website to look at, I want to talk, definitely want to talk a lot about your website in terms of the online store that you have, excuse me, at hotorjustme.com. And so asking about that, what inspired that idea and how do you bring together products to help women? Like, where did that come from? I think it's brilliant, but I want to understand like what drew you to that.
Yeah, I think it was just to find a place to put it all together, right? So there's articles and resources to read about everything from HRT to acupuncture, bone loss, and then compiled groups of products that women may need to navigate some of their symptoms like hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness and low libido, insomnia and fatigue, hair and skin changes. We have a bookstore and a gift shop. And then we'll be rolling out some new categories this year, including irregular and heavy periods, brain fog and concentration, mood changes and irritability, anxiety, and urinary incontinence. So we did a roundup of what the most common types of symptoms are that have products that could be solutions. And then I went so far to group them by bundles. So we have some really fun bundles on the site. Welcome to the club that has some books, a card, a gift card. There's Stay Cool and Calm that has a selection of cooling jewelry, like the bracelet that I'm wearing today. It's a freezable jewelry that helps you through hot flashes, personal fan. We have one called Spice It Up that has a collection of personal massagers and moisturizer and a nightgown, and then everything from chill out, hot flash relief, nighttime recovery. So just different products to help with each symptom.
Yeah, what I find really helpful when I went through your bundles is that I will say, as a consumer and a woman who's been through perimenopause, it's really nice to be able to see a collection of items that have been created and put together for us. Because now, in bits and pieces, I have found like there's a fan for women that you can put around your neck. I saw that on your website. And so it was like, I only heard about this fan in the last year or two. And yet it's something that has been in existence for a long time. 10 years ago, when I had a friend of mine who was going through this before me, she really loved it was like something, had a really clever name to it. It was like a chillo. It was like a pillow that you could put into the freezer and then you put it as like an insert into your pillow. And that was something that she swore by. But to find all of these different things in one location, I think is really amazing. And so, yeah, I just think it's really helpful to have it because for I think it's so accurate that women don't know what they're going through and they don't even know what's like coming around the corner. And so it's nice to have a place where all the information is in one place and that you, as symptoms come up, that you are able to find the products that are associated with it.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny you said that about the cooling fan. So I first saw women in New York during a heat wave last summer wearing these, and I thought, if these stylish women can wear this, then anyone can, right? And so I went in a deep dive and I ordered about 30 different fans and tried them all and just went through. Some of them were really noisy, some of them would catch your hair, some didn't do the job or ran out of batteries too quickly. So I can say that everything on the site has been vetted by narrowing down other offerings. The freezable eye mask that we have is wonderful too. When you talk about like the chillo, the eye mask it doesn't burn your skin. It's really calming. So you can use it beyond just any kind of night sweats, but also during the day when you might have any kind of like headache or fatigue as well. And then, yeah, we have quite a few sleep solutions. So everything from temperature regulating pillowcases and cooling performance sheets. what you wear on your body in terms of nightgowns, different kinds of nighties, different textures, shapes, fabrics. I personally like the one that has a T back on the racer back style so that I get as much skin contact on the sheets, cooling blankets. And there's also a lot of tips and advice. So I tell people optimizing for sleep is so important because having a good night's sleep means the next morning you don't have as much brain fog or fatigue or concentration issues. You're making healthy food decisions. You will likely go to the gym and get the endorphins that you need. And when it comes time to be in the mood, you will be because you have energy from the night before. So there's also tips and advice about eating smaller meals and not having a heavy meal close to bedtime, trying to stay away from caffeine in the afternoon. Same thing for alcohol in the afternoon and later in the day, and taking magnesium at night to help calm your body as you sleep, and then keeping your temperature somewhere between 60, 67 in the room, and setting up your environment, making sure you have either an eye mask like what we sell on our site or blackout curtains, including maybe earplugs if you have a partner who snores, and just optimizing for that perfect night of sleep and setting yourself up for success.
Yeah. One of the conversations we had on this podcast some time ago was couples who, because of these kinds of issues, they may actually sleep in like a king size bed that's actually two twin beds because they want their own individual covers. So if the partner wants a heavier cover, but the female partner is sweating and wants to kick it off, and we have found that solution has really worked for some of my friends. I haven't tried that myself, but it's interesting how creative people can be.
Yeah, when you're
It's
desperate,
period.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a similar issue, but we have just a king size bed, but I'll have my own cooling blanket, and that's what I fall asleep to, and my husband will just have the regular comforter. And then it's definitely, I've noticed times when I've made these changes, like cutting out caffeine, my night sweats have diminished substantially. And same thing for just having a lighter meal. I was finding, just as someone who spent 10 years telling everyone to drink alcohol, I'm now at this stage in life where I'm telling people, maybe just drink a little bit less or just cut out your evening cocktail or wine. And that's also made a big impact on sleep as well.
I also wanted to mention that I find it really admirable that you don't shy away from some of the more sensitive symptoms that women have, like the vaginal dryness and the mood swings or things, and even the lack of libido.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my gynae about a lack of libido and just saying it's so hard especially for me, because it hit me so early that I felt like I was in my mid 30s and I should be having the prime of my life in terms of sexuality, all of that. And yet I felt like there was something wrong with me and why is this happening? And so I really appreciate the fact that you don't shy away from those conversations and you had some very, what's the right way to put it? Just some options for women that are just honest and real. And I think also validate our desire to continue to feel attractive and desirable and want to continue being a sexual being. And so I really applaud you for doing that because I don't think that we hear that enough.
Yeah, it's one of our most popular categories. We have a selection of vaginal moisturizers, both water and coconut oil based. We have a personal moisturizer or lube, if you will, and a selection of different vibrators depending on what suits you and your body. We also have some good tips in terms of staying hydrated, considering pelvic floor exercises like Kegels. And then I've included a couple of apps for erotic audio stories. So there's Dipsea, Dipsea, and then Quinn. And I think the mind is one of the most important sexual organs, right? So I think sometimes we get in our head a little too much about things have to be perfect. And if you're watching like a visual porn or something like that, for me, it's not something I can do because it makes me feel uncomfortable or it makes me feel like I don't look like that or my body doesn't do that. And so I've completely shied away from anything like that. But discovering these erotic audio stories has been really enlightening because you find it takes a lot of the pressure off, right? So if my partner and I are thinking like, oh, okay, should we? And I'm feeling tired or maybe feeling feelings of low libido, I might say, let's listen to an audio story. And what's funny is it's just like naturally will just take the pressure off, get my mind out of the way and get us into a mood that maybe I wasn't there before. I didn't think I could get there. And then similarly, we discovered the Gottman Institute through therapy. And one of the tools that they gave us is an app called Love Decks. And they're just questions, right? Like it's just a series of questions that you can ask your partner on a date or about what's happening in their life. But they have these other cards called salsa cards, and they have spicy, mild, and or medium and mild. So just different levels of questions that can get you and your partner into a discussion about where you are with your relationship sexually.
Yeah, I think I saw those decks of cards and I thought it was really fun and a different way to approach the topic and warm up to the conversation and things like that. One of the final questions I have for you is, so what is it like for your daughter? I think you mentioned you have a daughter. And so what is it like for your daughter to be going through sort of her hormonal change and then you being at the age that you are? And I have thought about this many times because I thought to myself, was this like God's plan for us to have children that are going through their hormonal imbalance and then we're going through our hormonal imbalance? And we're both a little crazed in our own ways, but yeah, we're supposed to get along and we're supposed to care for this child. This child is supposed to put up with us. And I just think it's an interesting sort of a formula that we have going on.
Yeah, yeah, I call it meeting in the middle, right? It's the ability to see what they're going through at the same time that you're having something similar and have at least like a shared conversation around, I know what you mean. I'm having moments where I'm feeling out of my body or I'm having feelings of anxiety or my skin doesn't look the same way that it used to. So you have a little bit more of a sympathy, right? Understanding, and you can be vulnerable with your kid too about what's happening. I've discovered for those parents out there, there's a series of books from the American Girl Doll Company called All About You. There's one called Is This Normal? There's one called The Feelings Book, and these are all for girls. And then for boys, they have Guy Stuff and Guy Stuff Feelings. And they're really well written. They're books that you could read together with your child. And they're written in that old Cosmo style of an ace of, is this happening? Is this normal? So it takes the pressure off and makes them feel like, oh, someone else is dealing with this too.
Yeah, and I was really surprised that I actually use that for my daughter as well. My daughter is now 28, but I was really impressed that American Girl Doll had a book series about that. And it was probably the best series I found because it wasn't cutesy.
Nope.
It wasn't so biologically focused. It was a really nice mix. And I did not expect that from American Girl. I really
Same.
found that it to be a very nice mainstream book that girls can relate to, and that it's not dodging the conversation or anything, but really just speaking to it very candidly and making it very matter of fact. And I thought it was an excellent resource. So I agree with you. I thought that series was just really very good timing, and I found it. And I had been looking and I did a lot of research on it. And of all the books that I compared, it was really the best series. And Alyssa will be needing it soon at some point, just because her oldest is getting into that time age, maybe a couple years away. But
Yeah. I was gonna say I actually grabbed the book when my daughter was 8 and she opened it up and was like, yeah, no, and slid it back to me. So I guess she was a little too early or it was a little too early for her. So I'm like, okay, we'll get it again when she's gonna be 10 this year. So maybe like getting to that point. But it definitely, if you do it too early, they shy away from it. But I do think it's a great resource to definitely open that dialogue. I think they should make one for perimenopause and menopause.
Right? Yes. Let's do that.
final question for me, Carin, is what do you think is the most like undervalued or like underrepresented idea about menopause or perimenopause that you would really like to shine some light on and to share with our listeners? If they take one thing away from this, what would you think that is?
I think the biggest takeaway is just that you are not alone. This is a universal experience. It's going to happen to every woman. It's a change in hormones happens to our children. It happens to our spouses. It happens to all of us. And these feelings of what's happening to me, is this normal? No one understands. Just to take a step back and just have a little self-care, some sympathy with yourself, and just love yourself through it and know that you're not alone and that you'll get through it too.
Yeah. I think the one thing I'll add to that, and I'll say that because I'm from India, and I think that there's a lot of cultural implications when women reach a certain age culturally. And I think that for my mom in particular, I think what she passed on to me was this sense of it's done. It's like my life is over, right? And it doesn't have to be the end. To me, it's a very good time that some of the burden of being a woman is put behind us. We've done that. And now we can really, I think the one thing we've also realized by doing this podcast is that women will find their voice later in life, and that voice is available to them. And so I don't know if that's by design or I'm an unusual person, but I think that's the misconception I want women to hear, is that you don't have to shrink and hide and feel like, your womanhood is done. I think in many ways, an extension of your womanhood is yet to be discovered. And so don't rob yourself of that, is I think something I'd like to share as well.
That's beautiful. I saw a quote recently that aging is a privilege. Not everyone gets to do it. And I think that's really beautiful as a perspective, that we should be proud of the journey that we've lived and all the experiences that we've gained along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a really important conversation, not one that we talk about a lot, but definitely with the number of women who go through it and the amount of support that we women have to share with each other as we go through it, to find moments of laughter and find humor in it, because it's the only way we're going to survive this very challenging time, but in certain ways freeing as well. So I don't know if you have any final thoughts, Carin, before we end, but I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I have a gift for your listeners. If they go to the link in the show notes or our website, Hot or Just Me, they'll be able to click there and get a discount of 10%. And use the code Deconstructed to get that offer.
Thank you so much for the gift to our listeners. I really appreciate that. And we want to thank you again for this great conversation. And if any of our listeners wanted to get a hold of you, and how would they best do that?
Yeah, there's a contact form on our website, www.hotorjustme, or any socials at Hot or Just Me.
Perfect. Alyssa, any final thoughts before you close us out?
No, I just wanted to say thank you also, because I think this is just such an eye-opening and much needed discussion. And I'm going to be going to all the websites, and especially yours, and kind of get that information so that I can be more informed as I enter into this new journey that the two of you have so much knowledge by personal experience, and as well as all the work that you've put into this. So thank you for that. So if you enjoyed this episode, please listen back and join us next time for our next discussion. And you can always reach us at the Deconstructed Woman podcast on Facebook, and as well as our email address. And we would love to hear how this resonated with you. And if you have questions, feel free to send those over, and we'll talk to all of you soon.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions? Or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.